Chapter 803. Friendly Reminder. Sation, the former lieutenant of the Bright Lord Gunlog and leader of the Handmaidens, was standing in front of them with a calm smile. Sunny had not seen her after the tumultuous escape from the Forgotten Shore, where she had held the line as the commander of the second defense bulwark of the Dreamer army. He had thought that becoming a master would make him less susceptible to her presence, but it did not. Her striking beauty, her exotic looks, and the aura of mystery that surrounded Sation were just as compelling as ever. The knowledge of how frightening her true nature was also made it impossible for him to remain unaffected. Not to mention the most important fact of all. Sation was one of the adopted daughters of Kai Song, the ruler of the great Song clan and one of the three sovereigns. If anything, knowing more about her background only made Sunny pay the beautiful woman extra attention. What the hell is she doing here? Sation, meanwhile, looked at the other members of the cohort and said with a small, but seemingly sincere smile, "Athena, Kai, Kasha, Sunless, it is good to see you doing well too." Effie gave her a long look, then shrugged. "Likewise, how have you and your girls been?" After the return from the Forgotten Shore, half of the members of the former Dreamer army had decided to follow Cassie and became known as the Fire Keepers. Of the remaining half, most had chosen a different path, either remaining independent like Sunny and Aiko or joining various legacy clans. All the surviving handmaidens, however, had followed Sation back to Song. Just like that, the great clan had not only received its lost daughter back, but also earned the utmost loyalty of a dozen extremely promising recruits. Come to think of it, that might have been one of the reasons why Valor wanted to gain the allegiance of the Fire Keepers so badly. A group of exceptional and supremely battle-hardened awakened might not have been able to change the balance of power between the two great clans immediately. But in a few years, when the survivors of the Dreamer army started becoming masters or maybe even saints, eventually, that could easily change. Sation responded in a serious tone. "We are doing well. My clan embraced us with open arms. After reuniting with my sisters, I was also able to bring a lot of value to the Song family with my unique knowledge and experience. The long years I had spent on the Forgotten Shore were not for naught." She had been stuck in that hell for far longer than any of them. In fact, Sunny did not know how many years Sation had spent in the Dark City, exactly, but it might have been as high as 9 or 10. Being able to survive and hold on to power for so long spoke a lot about how resourceful and dangerous the daughter of Kai Song was, especially considering that, in the end, she was the only one of the old guard who had managed to escape. No wonder the great clan was so eager to get her back. Sation looked at them and smiled. "Of course, we have yet to achieve the same measure of success as the 5 of you. Reaching ascension so soon after becoming awakened is no small feat. You have my respect." Her smile paled a little. "I will be going away to challenge my own second nightmare in a few days. As a matter of fact, this ball is the last opportunity I have to experience the wonders of the waking world before that." She looked around wistfully and sighed. "So, she is also in a hurry to become a master, huh?" Sunny stared at the gray-skinned beauty with a bit of apprehension. Sation was already scary enough as an awakened. How much more powerful would she become after ascending? Kai offered the former leader of handmaidens a reassuring smile. "I am sure that you and your cohort will do fine. The second nightmare is a terrible challenge, but people who survived the Forgotten Shore are suited to face its dangers more than anyone else. You will triumph." Before Sation could answer, Nephi's finally spoke. Looking at the daughter of Song impassively, she said in her usual even tone, "I have to admit, I am surprised to see you here." Sation lingered for a moment. "Oh, you must have heard about the recent disharmony between Song and Valor. Do not pay it too much attention, Lady Nephis. Despite our disagreements, it is still important to present a united front. I am here to keep up appearances." Changing Star thought for a moment, then nodded. "I understand. You are here to send a message. However, I find it curious that a junior member like you was chosen above more senior representatives of the great clan song. One can't help but wonder what message exactly such a choice is intended to deliver." Seishin's smile widened a little. "Well, it is not my place to question the decisions of the elders. In any case, I am very happy that I got the chance to see you all again. While we were never truly friends, I value what you have done for me and my wards, as well as what we went through together, a great deal." Her pearly teeth glistened in the bright light of exquisite chandeliers, suddenly seeming much sharper. "I hope that we will be able to deepen that bond one day. Of course, whether or not it blossoms into a real friendship depends on our decisions." Sunny sighed. "Ah." Seishin looked at them one last time. Strangely, her gaze lingered on him for a few extra moments. Then, she politely excused herself and left to mingle with other guests of the ball. So that's what it was all about. Her meaning was more than clear. Clan Song decided to not go as far as making an earnest effort to spoil the negotiations with Valor and try to recruit the members of the cohort and the Fire Keepers into its ranks instead. However, they did issue a warning: make the right decision if you know what's good for you. Stay away from our rivals, or else. That threat might have been packaged into an exquisitely beautiful cover, but the underlying message remained quite clear. Looking at the back of Seishin as she was walking away, Sunny shook his head. "Did I somehow end up involved in politics? By the spell I did, didn't I? Curses. Why can't a guy just grow stronger than everyone in the world and unreasonably rich in peace?" A few minutes later, the atmosphere in the great hall suddenly changed. The hum of voices grew quiet, and many of the guests shifted, turning to a particular spot. As Sunny watched, a tall figure appeared on a wide balcony above them. The man was strong and severe, with a sharp face and even sharper, cold eyes. His black hair was touched by silver at the temples. He was wearing an elegant attire that somehow looked like a suit of impregnable armor despite being made of nothing but black fabric. His vermilion cloak moved slightly, as if touched by invisible wind. As soon as the man appeared, Sunny felt a considerable pressure descending on the hall. The dignified stranger radiated so much power and authority that it was hard not to admire him or fear him. He was a saint, without a doubt. What was more, his features looked slightly like that of Mordred and Morgan. For a moment, Sunny thought that he was looking at Anvil of Valor himself. But no, that could not be. Although the familial likeness was there, it was not too pronounced. The mythical sovereign was also not supposed to be able to enter the waking world easily, let alone openly show himself in public. That would just go against everything that the sovereigns did to remain in the shadows. This must be Saint Maddock of Valor, also known as Whispering Blade. Saint Maddock was one of Anvil's siblings and the nominal leader of the great clan Valor. Of course, Sunny knew who truly called the shots, but the status of this powerful man was by no means for show. Whispering Blade was a legendary warrior and one of humanity's most formidable champions in his own right. As the guests quieted down, Saint Maddock looked at them from above with his steely blue eyes, and then smiled slightly. Instantly, the pressure receded, making the mundane humans in the crowd sigh with relief. Morgan's uncle spoke, his strong voice easily reaching into every corner of the great hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, welcome to the annual ball of the great clan Valor. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome you all under our roof once again. In the past year, many things have happened. Some of our brothers and sisters are not with us anymore." A somber silence settled over the hall. Every year brought a lot of death to Awakened. Even masters were not spared from that fate. This year, in particular, had dealt a heavy blow to humanity. Even though few knew of what had really happened, the absence of Saint Cormac was clearly felt by many. Transcendents were so exceedingly rare that the loss of even one of them echoed across the world. As the guests turned somber, Whispering Blade's smile suddenly widened, dispelling the solemn mood. Despite that, it pleases me to see many new faces among you. Humanity has grown stronger yet again. New heroes rose to carry the torch for those who had fallen in battle. With champions like these, our world has nothing to fear. Despite it all, we persevere. But more than that, we rise. Nothing can stop our ascension. He looked at the guests and then sighed. Well, those of you who know me also know that I am not one for long speeches. To be honest, this one was actually written by my beloved wife, who is far more eloquent and wise than me, not to mention pleasant to look at. A wave of polite chuckles spread through the crowd. St. Maddox smiled once again. Today is not a day for sorrow. Today is a day for joy. And so let the ball commence. As soon as he said that, the space in the middle of the hall was cleared, and the musicians started to play a magnificent and emotional composition. Whispering Blade danced the first dance himself, accompanied by a beautiful, mature woman. Moving with elegance and grace, they both looked breathtakingly splendid. Soon other pairs joined them. Sonny observed the dance with a bit of interest. He had not known what to really expect from this ball, but to his relief, it was nothing like the awkward and almost comical sight that he had witnessed in the nightclub a few weeks ago. The dancers were much more purposeful and elaborate in their movements. Both partners had to move in synchronicity to not disturb the flow of the dance, following the music with surprising skill. The gracefulness of their steps, the exquisite attires, the radiant physical beauty common among the awakened, the luxurious decorations of the great hall, all of it made the ball look rather dazzling. He was also able to appreciate the ceremony due to his familiarity with shadow dance. Of course, his battle style was not a literal dance, however. It was derived from one. In fact, every battle style had something in common with dancing, since both had to do with motion, coordination, agility, and rhythm. So, even if Sonny was never taught how to dance, he was able to quickly learn the basics from just observing those who were better versed in it. He could have even joined the dancers, if he wanted to. Of course, he didn't. Sonny noticed that it was customary for men to invite the women to dance. As he watched, many handsome and distinguished guests offered their hands to their beautiful counterparts and led them to the center of the hall. More than a few burning gazes landed on Nephis, but were quickly doused by her cold, unapproachable expression. Fortunately or unfortunately, the other members of the cohort were caught in the cone of silence that surrounded her, so no one approached them either. After some time, Kai invited Cassie to dance, while Effie wandered away in the direction of the tables that were barely standing, burdened by the weight of various delicacies. Sonny, meanwhile, grew bored. Damn, how long do we have to wait? Are these negotiations going to start or what? Eventually, he glanced at Nephis, then left her and walked away in search of a bathroom. A few minutes later, he was washing his hands in front of a mirror. Looking at his pale reflection, Sonny lingered for a few moments and then said, "I know that you are there. Stop hiding." Nothing happened for a few seconds. Then, his reflection suddenly offered him a pleasant smile. "Oh, how did you know?" When his reflection suddenly spoke, Sonny flinched and jumped back. A startled expression appeared on his face. He stared at the mirror with wide eyes, then cursed and remained silent for a few seconds. Finally, Sonny uttered through gritted teeth, "I did not know. I just developed a habit of saying random rubbish to mirrors in case something like this happens. Who knew that this time you would actually turn up?" Mordred, who disturbingly wore his face, blinked a couple of times, then laughed. "So it was a bluff. Goodness, I can't believe I fell for this trick." Sonny's reflection shook its head. Sonny himself, who felt incredibly troubled by the sight of his own likeness being inhabited by the Prince of Nothing, sucked in a breath of air, and then hissed, What are you even doing here? Have you entirely lost your mind? This is the stronghold of clan valor. Mordred shrugged. Why can't I visit my own clan's ball? Sonny suppressed the desire to palm his face. Not if you want to live. But then again, why would he care if Mordred lived or died? Actually, it would have been wonderful if the troublesome mirror wraith was caught and either destroyed or imprisoned again by his mighty family. Sonny would have one less headache if they did. Unless Mordred decided to trade away his secrets, of course. Damnation! The Prince of Nothing, meanwhile, waved his hand dismissively. Ah, don't worry so much, Sunless. I am not here to do anything. I just wanted to take a peek at the festivities. No one will notice. Judging by his confident smile, Mordred was sufficiently certain of that statement. This probably meant that he had acquired at least one potent anti-divination tool. Well, the mere fact that the great and mighty clan Valor had failed to track him down, yet already hinted at that possibility. If not for Sonny's random shot in the dark, no one would indeed have noticed the transient reflection. Mordred looked at him and lingered for a few moments. Then he said in a pensive tone, You know, Sunless, for someone who keeps denying his ties with the great clans, you sure brush sides with them a lot. Sonny was so outraged that he lost the gift of speech for a second. And whose fault is that, you bastard? If you didn't involve me in your mess, I would have been living happily ever after somewhere else. Well, probably. Mordred awkwardly coughed. Then he regained his composure and said with a bit of reproach, I already apologized, didn't I? In any case, complications or not, you should choose your friends carefully, Sunless. Sonny glared at the reflection for a bit. Am I having a déjà vu? I swear I just had this exact conversation with someone else a few minutes ago. You did not steal Sation's body by any chance, did you? Mordred tilted his head a little. I don't think so. Who is Sation? Sonny opened his mouth, then frowned. No, he wouldn't have. The damned lunatic was already being hunted by one great clan. Killing an heiress of another would do him no good. An acquaintance of mine. Never mind about her. Mordred smiled. If you say so, I must say you do have a lot of interesting acquaintances. A curious expression appeared on the reflection's face. That changing star is rather fascinating. To think that the immortal Flame clan was able to return to a semblance of its former glory, and with the help of a young dreamspawn no less. Maybe I should take her body instead. What do you think, Sunless? Should I? He was obviously probing to get a reaction out of Sonny, but luck was not on his side. Sonny simply shrugged and said indifferently, Be my guest. It seemed as if he was absolutely disinterested in whether Mordred would kill and replace Nephi's or not. Of course, he wasn't. Not really. He just thought that the Prince of Nothing would dearly regret trying to consume Changing Star's soul. Not only was she a tyrant, which would make battling her a nightmare, he also suspected that her soul possessed its own formidable defenses. Nephi's had already hinted that the lineage of sun gods strengthened it somehow, but that only accounted for the quantity of her force. There was also the quality. Sonny had a hunch that Mordred would be burning himself alive if he tried to invade her radiant soul sea. Wouldn't that be a sight to see? He glanced at his reflection, then said coldly, Is this all you wanted to say? Because if that's it, I have a ball to return to. Then Sonny scoffed and added, And by the way, didn't you give a very pompous speech about how I should pray to never meet you again, the last time we saw each other? Kind of presumptuous of you to then go ahead and place yourself straight in my sights, in a bathroom of all places. Mordred's smile paled a little. I did not forget about that, Sunless. Truth be told, I am still very peeved about what you have done. Come to think of it, maybe I should do something to lessen my frustration. Say, which of your friends do you value the least? Sonny's fist slammed in the mirror, shattering it. Mordred laughed, staring at him from the shards. His face, Sonny's face, became distorted by the cracks. Oh, sunless, sunless, so passionate. Sonny stared at the broken mirror for a few moments, then said through gritted teeth, I value all my friends, you bastard. Affection is not something you can assign a numerical value to and then compare which number is bigger. Well, you wouldn't know, I guess. Not only do you care about no one has most likely ever cared about you either. He took a step forward and stared directly at his reflection. You like to talk big, Mordred, and make it seem as if I should be afraid of you, but that is true the other way around, too. I can be scary when I want to, too. Think long and think hard before making me your enemy, or you will learn to fear the shadows. Mordred stopped laughing and looked at him silently for a few long moments. His smile slowly disappeared. After a few moments of silence, the Prince of Nothing sighed. We understand each other then. Let's not become enemies, Sunless. Crushing you won't bring me any joy. With that, he disappeared, as if he had never been there. The reflection still looked the same, but the alien presence seemed to be gone from it. All that remained was a broken, distorted, angry image of Sonny. He grimaced and then turned away. We'll see who crushes whom, bastard. If time comes after returning to the dancing hall, Sonny saw it in a new light. His perception had shifted, making everything seem darker and more dangerous. He had already been apprehensive about the crowd of guests, but now every one of them looked like a potential threat. Mordred might have said that he was not planning to do anything and had just come to take a look, but could the banished prince be trusted? As far as Sonny was concerned, the lunatic could have been on his way to publicly assassinate one of his relatives, or slaughter as many as he could, right now. Much worse, he could be hiding inside of anyone. Every guest was a potential host. Every mundane human, every awakened, every master, none of them were beyond suspicion. Even saints were not off the list, perhaps. Sonny suppressed a groan. Curse it all. There were two carriers of divine aspects in the world that had made it their life's goal to destroy the great clan Valor at all costs. And now, both of them were in this building. Even if nothing happened, the threat alone made him itchy. The great hall, where dozens of beautiful pairs danced suddenly, did not look as splendid. Turning around, Sonny looked at Nephi's, lingered for a few moments, and then walked in her direction with steady steps. As he came close, he offered her a hand and asked, "Shall we dance?" Neph looked at him in confusion for a couple of seconds, then shrugged and placed her hand in his. Together they walked to the middle of the hall. Sonny put his second hand on her waist, while she put hers on his shoulder. Suddenly, they were extremely close to each other. Sonny's heart skipped a beat. It was in moments like this one that he missed having two. Without wasting any time, Sonny led Neph into a dance. It wasn't too hard, he just had to listen to the music and repeat what the other dancers were doing. With his proficiency in shadow dance, understanding the logic and cadence of their movements was incredibly easy for him. Although Sonny was dancing for the first time in his life, he looked more comfortable and adept at it than most of the guests. Changing Star seemed like a natural, too. Perhaps it was due to her own combat mastery, or perhaps she had received lessons as an heiress of a legacy clan. In any case, almost instantly after they started the dance, the pair caught a lot of admiring stares. Sonny did not care. He had much bigger problems on his mind. Trying to not let her closeness affect him too much and failing at it, he waited for a bit and gathered his thoughts. Finally, Sonny said, his voice drowned by the music and the hum of the great hall. I've been meaning to ask. The time to hide his head in the sand was over. Nephi silently raised an eyebrow, prompting him to continue. What, exactly, are you planning to do today? You know that Valor won't take no for an answer. They want to have all of us, but if that is not possible, they'll only settle for getting at least one. That way, they'll be assured that the rest of us won't join a rival faction. So, which one of us is going to become a retainer of the great clan Valor? Changing Star lingered for a while, allowing him to lead her in the dance. Her hand rested easily on his shoulder. After a few steps, she suddenly asked, "You don't really understand, do you?" Sunny did not frown, but his eyes suddenly became darker. "I don't. What is it that you think I don't understand?" A somber expression slowly appeared on her face. "Valor and Song are not rival factions, Sunny. They're war camps." As they spun under the light of beautiful chandeliers, she leaned even closer and said, "I've studied the facts for a long time after returning to the waking world. The ripples caused by the death of Saint Cormac, the subtle machinations that happen in the darkness, the growing imbalance of power between Bastion and Ravenheart, even the timing of Sation challenging the second nightmare. It all paints a clear picture." A slight scowl appeared on Sunny's face. "What are you trying to say?" Nephi sighed. "I am trying to make you see that the conflict between the great clans has grown into something more than mere disagreement. They are at war, or rather, they will be soon." Sunny felt her hand growing tense in his own. "War? Wait. What does a war between great clans even look like?" Changing Star shook her head. "Something like that has never happened before. So, who knows? 3 things are certain, however. It will be hidden. It will be bloody. It will claim the lives of many people." He suddenly felt cold. Damned legacies. Antarctica is about to fall, and they choose that exact moment to lunge at each other's throats. Bastards. Sunny remained silent for several steps, and then looked at Nephi's intently. "All right, but what does it have to do with us?" She suddenly gripped his shoulder tighter and met his gaze. Cold, dangerous white sparks were dancing in her eyes. "Don't you see? It has everything to do with us." Sunny stopped himself from snarling. "I don't, Nephi's. Whether the great clans are embroiled into a secret war or not does not change anything. You are still too small and weak to openly oppose them. Please, tell me that you understand that. You were the one who said that these people are too strong, that their power is too absolute." Changing Star stared at him for a while, her face turning impassive. After a few moments of silence, she said, "I remember, I understand." She looked down and then added, Which is why the answer to your question might not be what you want to hear, Sonny. You asked me which one of us will become a member of the great clan." Nephi's raised her head and looked him straight in the eyes. Then she said evenly, "It's me. I will join Valor." When Sonny heard what Nephi's had to say, he almost stepped on her foot. His rhythm was broken, making it difficult to remain in the flow of the dance. He narrowly avoided stumbling, regained his composure, and threw a burning gaze at her. "What?" Her expression did not change. "You heard me." Sonny opened his mouth, lingered for a moment, then simply turned around and pulled her by the hand. Despite the fact that many people stared at this sudden turn of events, he cut through the dancing guests, forcing Neff to follow. They left the middle of the great hall, then disappeared from the central chamber entirely. Finding himself in a corridor that ran along the length of the dancing hall, Sonny walked swiftly, searching for an empty room. Eventually, he had to settle for a kitchen of sorts. Several chefs and their assistants were busy preparing more refreshments for the guests of the ball, or rather, they had been. Even before Sonny entered the room, the shadows inside suddenly moved and grew darker, startling the kitchen staff. Throwing a heavy glance at them, he said in an even voice, "Leave." The chefs stared at the 2 masters in confusion for a couple of moments, then silently backed away and left through a different door, their faces pale. Sonny and Nephi's were left alone. He waited for a bit, then let go of her hand and outstretched his own. A strange flute carved of emerald bone appeared in it from a swirl of sparks. Sonny brought it to his lips and blew into the hole. Surprisingly, no sound came out of the flute. Instead, it seemed to have absorbed all sounds, enveloping them in a cone of silence. Now, no one would have been able to listen in on their conversations. Sonny's shadows also kept watch outside the kitchen, just to make sure. Finally, he turned to Nephi's and snarled, "You join Valor, what the hell?" Changing Star sighed, then took a step back and leaned on the wall. Then she spoke in her usual calm, steady voice. "Why are you so surprised?" Sonny stared at her in stunned silence. Then he shook his head. "What about your great goals? After all the crazy stunts you pulled, after all that talk about wishing to bring the three ghouls to their knees and destroy them, you are just going to join them?" Neff's eyes grew somber. "My plans did not change, Sonny." He frowned. "So you are going to destroy Valor, but you are also going to become one of their own. Don't you see the contradiction?" She looked at him intensely, then said with boiling but suppressed emotion in her voice, "There is no contradiction. On the contrary, this is the only way I can advance my goals." Nephi's took a step forward and pierced him with a searing gaze. "The sovereigns are indeed too strong. Their power is indeed too fearsome, and I am truly too weak to contend with them for now. However, they will fall by my hand in the end. Did you hope that 2 years of being lost in the dream realm would have dulled my resolve? Did you think that I would give up?" Sonny shook his head with a dark expression. Changing Star smiled. "No, my resolve was only made sharper. I spent so many days, so many nights thinking about how to move forward and bring these old monsters down. It was not too hard to realize that if my own strength is not enough, I have to borrow it from someone else. Whose strength should I borrow, then? Ah, but that is so obvious. If the sovereigns are so powerful, why would I not use their own power to destroy them?" Sonny blinked slowly. "So divide and conquer. This is your great plan." Nephi shrugged. "They are already divided. I have to thank you for that, by the way. Although the conflict between Valor and Song had been brewing for a long time, the sudden appearance of the Dreamer army made it worse. But most of all, the death of Saint Cormac and the return of the banished Prince of War was what finally made it intolerable for the great clans." He scowled. What does Mordred have to do with any of this?" Changing Star smiled darkly. "He is in the same position as me, which means that he will do the same thing as me. He would have sought out a way to use one of the sovereigns against the other, too." Sonny's eyes widened. Mordred had a vendetta against his two fathers, both the one who had spawned him and the one who had raised him. That left only. "Don't tell me, is that lunatic going to join forces with the Song clan?" Nephi's nodded with satisfaction. "I would be surprised if he did not already. And if I can come to that conclusion, then that means that Valor knows as well. Why do you think the strife between the two great clans has suddenly grown so dire? Valor has fewer saints. Thanks to Sation, Valor has fewer promising awakened seeds. And now, one of their most formidable creations has joined hands with the adversary. How do you think they'll react?" Sonny looked at her grimly. "Not well." Changing Star lingered for a few moments, then nodded. "But that is what puts me in a unique position. Yes, I am small and weak. Yes, my individual strength is more or less insignificant. However, because of how disadvantaged the great clan Valor is, they desperately need me. My value in this situation is disproportionate to what it would have been otherwise. Which is why they are ready to put aside their desire to see me dead, and are willing to embrace me instead." Sonny scoffed. "That is all great, but why would you want to embrace them too? Wouldn't it be better to stay away and watch as the two great clans maul each other, then swoop in and finish off the weakened victor?" Nephi shook her head. "No matter how much one of the great clans weakens, its armor would still be too strong and impenetrable for me to break through it." He raised an eyebrow. "So what?" Changing Star looked at him, cold white flames dancing in her eyes. So I won't try to. Instead, I'm going to bypass the armor and attack them from within. Sunny grimaced. What Nephi's had said made sense, as much as the word sense could be applied to her. Changing Star wanted to destroy the nightmare spell, and the sovereigns were in her way. Just like Gunlog, the ruthless tyrant of the Bright Castle, they had seemingly given up on pursuing liberation from the spell, and instead settled for the great power that it had already bestowed upon them. What was worse, they were holding others back from rising high enough to threaten their position. At least that was how it looked from below. Perhaps the sovereigns had other reasons for their despotism and inaction, but Sunny had no way of knowing if they did. Not that it mattered to Nephi's. To her, they were simply an obstacle that had to be destroyed. Her personal desire to avenge the immortal Flame clan and bring retribution to those who had betrayed her father only made the task sweeter. However, her enemies were much too strong. She would only be able to challenge them if she became supreme herself, but the path to supremacy was guarded by the very people she needed to destroy. Faced with this dead end, she had decided to use the sovereign's own power to vanquish them. She also wanted to infiltrate the ranks of her enemy and put herself in the position to attack one of the great clans from within when the time came. Sunny let out a heavy sigh. So, let me get this straight. You are going to join Clan Valor, fight for them until Clan Song is destroyed to earn Anvil's trust, then turn your blade against him. Nephi's lingered for a few moments, then shrugged. More or less, why? He rubbed his face. This is a terrible plan. There are more holes in this plan than in Swiss cheese, whoever Swy is. Who says that Valor will win this war? Who says that Anvil will ever treat you as anything but a latent threat? Do you think that he is a fool? Surely he knows how much you have to hate his guts. Changing Star looked at him calmly. I do. I say who wins. I say whether he trusts me or not. It all depends on me, does it not? If I want the great Song clan to fall, I have to make sure that it falls. If I want to win Anvil's favor, I have to make sure that he favors me. I am not a passive observer in this, Sunny. I have agency to shape the future into what I want it to be, or at least try to. Sure, the chances of success are poor, but when were the odds ever on our side? Sunny scoffed, then shook his head. I'll give you that. Our luck was always terrible. However, there is a difference between being thrown into overwhelming danger against your will and deciding to put yourself at risk of your own volition. Unlike before, we don't have to be underdogs. You are choosing this. Nephi shook her head as well. That is where you are wrong, Sunny. Do you really think that I have any choice? Do you think that I can turn back now, that the sovereigns will ever let me be? No, it is too late for that. It is as you said, Valor are determined to have their pound of flesh. All I can choose is where they sink their teeth. He glared at her for a few moments, then spat. Aren't you forgetting something? Looking at him, Changing Star frowned. What? Sunny took a step forward. Me, you are forgetting me. I have a say in this too, Goddammit. She remained silent for a while. Eventually, Nephi said, I am not forcing you to do anything. You don't have to follow me to Valor if you don't wish to. A crooked smile appeared on his face. Oh, great, but is this really true? There is a certain bond between us after all. I am only free to do as I wish until you decide otherwise. Who knows if your mood will change one day? Neff stared at him for a few long seconds. Then she sighed and crossed her arms. Ah, so this is what it's all about. Sunny gritted his teeth, then said slowly, Since we are talking about it, let's talk. This conversation was a long time coming. So Nephi's, tell me, what are you going to do with your power over me? Her face remained impassive. Neph looked at him coldly for a moment and then said, Nothing. I will never order you to do something for me ever again. Sunny was already opening his mouth to retort before she finished speaking, but then froze. He stood still for a few moments, then let out a long breath. Well, good, because if you ever tried, one of us would have died. That is not a threat, just a fact. Suddenly, white sparks ignited in Changing Star's eyes. She leaned forward slightly and said, her voice full of barely suppressed emotion, "And do you know why?" Suddenly feeling a sense of unease, Sunny frowned. "No, I can't say that I do. Why?" She took a step forward and stopped in front of him, almost as close as they had been during their dance. Her face was still, but her eyes were full of searing flame. "Because I don't need anyone to follow me against their will. I don't need a magical collar to make people serve me. I don't need slaves. That is not enough for me, Sonny. Why should I settle for submission when I can have loyalty? People who will follow me, serve me, and obey me will do so because that is their most ardent desire. They will do so with a smile. If I ever want to make you mine, Sonny, you will become mine not because you were forced to, but because you would want to. That is also a fact." He stared at her for a few moments, startled by the sudden intensity of her words. Then, a stubborn expression appeared on his face. "Aren't you too full of yourself? Who do you think you are to decide what I want?" Nephi's looked at him, then turned away and sighed. I am the person who knows you best in the world, Sonny. 2 worlds even." She lingered for a few moments, and then added quietly, "As I said, I will never force you to do anything. But whether you like it or not, our fates are intertwined. And that bond has nothing to do with your innate ability. In truth, they were entangled the moment we met in front of the academy gates. We just did not know it yet. You can't escape it." "Can't escape fate." Sonny looked at Nephi's for a long time, and then smiled darkly. "Watch me." With that, he dismissed the bone flute, turned around and left the kitchen. Entering the corridor, Sonny walked away. His nostrils were flaring, and his face was contorted by an expression of anger. As he walked, he took out his communicator and dialed a familiar number. After some time, a female voice resounded from the speaker. "Sonny, what a nice surprise. It's good to hear from you." He hesitated for a few moments, and then took a deep breath. Then Sonny smiled and answered in a friendly tone. "Master Jet, hey, I have a question for you." He paused for a second and then asked, "How cold is it in Antarctica?" Sonny was riled and angry. Once again, talking to Nephi's made him lose his sense of balance. However, the decision he made was not an emotional one. He had enough composure to keep a clear head even while being affected by seething feelings. Years of battles and dire conflicts had taught him how to keep a cool head. So his choice was cold and calculated. 2 things had become clear during the conversation. The first one was very simple. Nephi's intended to join the great clan Valor, while Sonny didn't want to have anything to do with it. It was one thing to become a retainer of a powerful and prosperous clan in order to make use of its vast knowledge, arsenal, and resources. Despite his strong desire to remain independent, Sonny had entertained the idea himself. However, it was a completely different thing to join an embattled clan that was on the verge of entering a destructive and bloody war against a similarly fearsome adversary. To add insult to injury, Valor was on the losing end of the equation. Their enemy, the great clan Song, held all the advantages. And even worse than that was the idea of joining a warring faction with conscious plans of betraying it further down the line. Nephi's was more than willing to eventually face not one, but both great clans in battle. She had her goals and conviction, but Sonny just wanted to be left alone. He saw no reason to follow her into the dragon's maw. More than that, with her joining Valor, the initial condition that had forced him into the damned negotiations in the first place was resolved. Since Valor was willing to settle for recruiting just one member of the cohort, and Changing Star was willing to play the role of the recruit, then why the hell would he follow suit? In short, Despite all the contradictory feelings raging in Sonny's heart, the situation was rather straightforward. There was no compelling reason for him to enter into service of the great clan, but there was a convenient opportunity for him to take a step back and walk away. He would be a fool not to use it. Of course, in reality, things were a bit more complicated. What Changing Star had said might have angered him, but she was not wrong. Their fates did, indeed, seem to be intertwined. From being born in the same year to receiving divine and complementing aspects, from meeting at the gates of the academy to being sent to the same small patch of the forgotten shore, whether by coincidence or not, their connection went far beyond the tether of the shadow bond. Sonny had a strong suspicion that his intrinsic attribute, faded, had a lot to do with placing Nephi's in his path, and as much as Sonny wished to defy fate, he was not arrogant enough to think that he was ready to break its chains just yet. He could already see how, no matter what he did, he would not be able to escape colliding against Changing Star again. She had been right when she said that escaping the notice of the great clans entirely was impossible for them, more so for her, but also true for Sonny. With his meteoric rise, his special strategic asset designation, and his connection to both Nephi's and Mordred, not to mention Shadow God and Weaver, coming into contact with the sovereigns and their domains was just a matter of time. Even if Neph joined Valor and Sonny did not, they would most likely meet again soon enough. The question, then, was more about the nature of their future relationship than whether it would exist or not. So, what could Sonny do to shape it into something that had a semblance of corresponding to his desires? Perhaps the most important revelation that had resulted from their conversation was the nature of Neph's intentions towards Sonny and her power over him. Sonny had spent several weeks burying his head in the sand and avoiding this pivotal discussion. As the result, those weeks had been, perhaps, some of the nicest in his life. However, his actions had also caused everything to blow up in his face in the end. Nephi's had said in no uncertain terms that she had no intention of ever issuing another order to him, not because of any moral consideration, but simply because it was beneath her. Changing Star had no need for an unwilling slave. She disdained the idea of forcing anyone to obey her. Instead, she planned to have people follow her of their own free will. Instead of enslaving anyone, she preferred to have people enslave and bind themselves by their desire to serve her. Neph had told him that she would never force him to do anything, but she also seemed to be certain that he would follow her willingly in the end. And that, to Sonny, was the core problem of the dynamic between them. He believed that Nephi's valued him, she even respected him, but despite all that, she still saw him as a follower. And a follower could never be an equal. Damn it! Worst of all, her stance was not baseless. Sonny couldn't help but think back to his conversation with Effie. The Huntress had told him once that he would never be stronger than Changing Star, because Changing Star had something that he lacked. Conviction. Sonny had been tempted to dismiss her well-meant, but biting remark. However, he could not dismiss the fact that despite all his desperate attempts, despite him almost killing himself several times to catch up to Nephi's, there was still a noticeable gap in power and accomplishment between them. He did not think that he lacked determination. Gods knew that very few people have pushed themselves as hard and endured as much as he had. But his last conversation with Changing Star had finally given Sonny an inkling of what it was exactly that he lacked. As far as Sonny saw it, his determination was no less intense than Neph's. However, all his goals were internal. All he did was react to things. He did not strive to reach anything. Instead, he only strived to avoid and get away from things. Get away from danger, from poverty, from fate itself. He had always been reactive. Neph, on the contrary, had always been active. She had always pursued a goal that was larger than herself. As the result, her conviction pushed her forward like an external force, while Sunny was stuck trying to pull himself up with nothing propelling him forward. That was why he was destined to always lag behind. Selfish desire to attain material wealth and live free would never be able to push him as hard and as far as changing stars' insane and unattainable dream was pushing her. At least that was his current thinking. Maybe it was all senseless crap. In any case, Sunny was determined to try and find an equally powerful motivation. Either it would help him, or it would not. However, no matter what happened, he was not satisfied being seen as a valued follower instead of an equal. He was still determined to grow stronger, much stronger, and if conviction was what it took to speed up his progress, he was willing to give it a try. Where was one supposed to find conviction, though? Well, Sunny was pretty sure that attempting to save hundreds of millions of people in Antarctica was a good place to start. That was where he was going to go in search of true strength. A couple of days later, Sunny was staring at his living room with a strange expression on his face. Everything had already been settled. He was leaving on another long expedition, this time in the waking world instead of the dream realm. Somehow, it promised to be even more of a nightmare. Well, whatever. High matters of fate and conviction aside, Antarctica was still a perfect place for him to grow stronger. Now that Sunny was a master, it was not as easy for him to gather shadow fragments. Only fallen nightmare creatures and those more powerful would do. Finding swarms of them was a task in and of itself, and the southern quadrant that was about to be devoured by an endless horde of abominations offered a perfect opportunity. Not only would he be able to work toward becoming a tyrant, test his mettle, and sharpen his skill, there would also be plenty of soul shards for him to collect, which he needed to continue practicing weaving. So, Sunny was supposed to be gathering his things and preparing to leave. The thing was that he had already done that before the ball, just in case he would have to run away in haste. Sunny had prepared so thoroughly that he could just walk out of the door and disappear right now. Weird. He sighed and then checked the refrigerator again, just to make sure that he did not leave anything that could spoil there. Nope, all clean. His communicator vibrated, then displayed a notification. The title of a network article appeared in view. Breaking news. A young hero is adopted by the brother-in-arms of her late father. Changing star joins hands with the great clan Valor. The corner of his mouth twitched. At that moment the door opened, letting in Effie and Kai. The two looked around, noticing the condition of the house. A few moments later the huntress shook her head. Damn, you are really leaving. Sunny closed the refrigerator, then walked over and patted her on the shoulder. I am. Effie stared at him for a couple of moments, then sighed. And you're still not going to tell us where? He smiled. I'm not at liberty to say. Don't worry, though. You'll probably learn in about a month. She blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Sunny waved a hand. It just means that you'll know soon. Effie remained silent for a few moments, then shrugged with irritation. Well, all right, be that way then. Sunny hesitated for a bit. Finally, he asked, what about you and the others? This time it was Kai who answered. You must have already seen the news. It hasn't been officially announced yet, but a thing like that is hard to keep secret. Nephi's is being adopted by Clan Valor. Cassie and the Firekeepers will follow her as retainers. As for Effie and I, well, to be honest, we haven't decided yet. Sunny glanced at his friends with a somber expression. What are you guys thinking? Effie leaned on the wall and grimaced. I don't know. I was always thinking about becoming a master, but weirdly, I never really thought about what I would do after. Those pompous Valor folks rub me the wrong way, but they do have a lot to offer. Plus, pretty much everyone I know is with them now. Kai smiled weakly. I am even more lost. I didn't even have thoughts of becoming a master. Now that I am, I want to do some good, I guess. It's just hard to determine what is the best way to do it. Sonny lingered for a few moments. A heavy sigh escaped from his lips. Well, don't be in a rush to make a decision. Wait for April at least. It was February right now. By April, the collapse of Antarctica would be slowly starting, and the government would have already announced voluntary mobilization. Sonny had wanted to tell his friends about the approaching disaster, but Master Jet insisted on keeping it confidential for now. He was not sure that Effie and Kai would want to go there anyway. The two of them, meanwhile, glanced at each other. Then Kai cautiously asked, "Does it have anything to do with your sudden departure?" Sonny nodded. "It does. Don't ask anything else, though, or you'll put me in an awkward position." Neither of them did, respecting his request. A strange silence settled between them. Finally, Sonny scoffed. "What are you guys doing? It's not like we're saying goodbye. I'm still anchored at the ivory tower, you fools. I can always hop in the dream realm and meet you there." Kai scratched the back of his head. "Oh yeah, true. I didn't think about that." Sonny shook his head. "Same goes for Nephi's and Cassie, since they're not planning to move to Bastion yet. We might not be an active cohort anymore, but we're still a big, dysfunctional family of sorts. I can guarantee that you won't miss me. In fact, you'll probably wish that I appeared in front of your faces less often." He grinned and then gestured to the door. "In any case, thanks for dropping by, but now I really have to go. I'm on a bit of a schedule." He walked them outside, then watched as they boarded a PTV and left. There were no emotional goodbyes, since what he had said was true. They would all be seeing each other in the dream realm often, no matter where they were in the waking world. So that meant that he had one last thing to do. Sonny sealed the house by inputting a security code into the lock panel, looked at it one last time, and walked to one of the neighboring buildings. He took out his communicator, sent a short message, and then waited for a bit. A minute later, a slightly surprised teenage girl walked out onto the porch, wearing cozy home clothes. "Sonny, why are you here? We're not supposed to have a lesson today." He smiled, and then pointed to the backpack that hung from his shoulder. "Hey, Rain, I just came by to say that I'll be going away again. This time, it might take a bit longer for me to return." Her expression subtly changed. "Oh." She remained silent for a while, then asked in a guarded, tentative voice, Is it going to be dangerous again?" Sonny shrugged with a carefree expression. "Dangerous? Well, I guess. I'm pretty certain that I can handle it, though. I'm a pretty tough guy, so don't worry." He sighed and then added, "Plus, I am staying in the real world this time. You can message me whenever. The network connection is going to be patchy where I'm going, so I might not be able to answer immediately. I will eventually, though. That's a promise." Finally, she relaxed a little. "Really, that's great." He nodded. After hesitating for a few moments, Sonny took a step closer and said, "You are going to turn 16 in a couple of months, Rain. That means that you have to be ready. You might be chosen by the spell or you might not. In any case, I think that you are sufficiently prepared." He fell silent for a bit and then added, "I taught you as much as I could. The rest depends on you. Keep practicing with your sword. Keep sharpening your mind as well. Most importantly, keep working on your mentality." Rain looked at him and nodded seriously. "I will." She did not notice that something strange had happened in the spot where their shadows intersected. A massive, dark silhouette that resembled a Stygian serpent flowed from Sonny's shadow, then hid itself in hers. Sonny had invoked one of Soul Serpent's abilities. Grace of Shadows, ability description. The master of the Soul Serpent can grace another with the trust and companionship of their shadow guide. One should be careful whom they bestow with their grace. Entrusting others with the loyalty of shadows is the same as sharing one's soul, and thus should not be offered lightly. He could not give Rain any memories. Neither could he give her any echoes. Rain did not possess an aspect or a soul core to encompass them. She certainly did not possess a shadow core to receive one of his shadows. But Serpent was different. Grace of Shadows allowed it to accompany anyone who had a shadow, including a mundane human. So, Sunny transferred Serpent to Rain and commanded it to hide itself unless the girl was in mortal danger. With the help of an ascended devil, she would be able to survive anything. Sunny knew that by providing Rain with his handicap, he might have been stunting her own growth. But he did not care. His sister did not have to grow strong or die. He was more than capable of being strong for the both of them. Looking at her, he smiled. "Well, anyway, don't be a stranger. If you need advice, just message me. You're my only student after all, so if you suddenly die, my reputation will be ruined. No one will ever hire me as a tutor again." Rain glared at him for a moment, then scoffed. "Why would I die? I'm too smart for that. You, however, make sure not to die yourself. I won't be able to brag that my tutor is a master if you're dead." Sunny grinned, then waved at her and turned away. It was time to leave the city where he had grown up, both for the first time and once again. Sunny had never thought that he would leave the city one day. He had barely ever thought that there was anything beyond the city actually. More than that for him, the city proper itself had always seemed like an alien land. His whole world used to start and end with the outskirts. Tens of millions of people who lived in the outskirts had a very special relationship with the wilderness beyond. They spent their lives much closer to it than real citizens, and were not separated from it by the tall barrier walls that encompassed powerful air filters. On one hand, it made them more attuned to the existence of the outside. On the other hand, they associated the outside with death, disease, and starvation on a much more visceral level. To them, the wilderness meant death in a very practical sense of the word, as opposed to distant and purely theoretical. That was why Sunny felt very weird as he stared at the train that was supposed to take him to the rendezvous point, where Master Jet was supposed to meet him. The long-range transcontinental train did not look anything like the light intricity one Sunny was familiar with. It resembled a massive, heavily armored metal beast that stretched for hundreds and hundreds of meters, its long body composed of various bulky segments. There were passenger carriages, massive cargo carriages, various utility carriages, and even a mobile repair and fabrication unit capable of restoring damaged sections of the railway should the train encounter any hindrances on the way. Rows of large-caliber turret, automated cannons, and gun emplacements rose from the roof, manned by the railroad technicians and security officers. It was a fearsome, moving fortress. Anything less would not have been reliably safe, considering that the government rarely paid attention to the nightmare gates that opened away from population centers. Sunny studied the train curiously for a while, then went ahead and found the carriage he was assigned to. As a master, he was entitled to ride in the lavishly furnished car meant for high-ranking citizens, government officials, and members of legacy clans. He also got a whole cabin to himself. The cabin was comparable in size to his room at the academy, but much better stocked and equipped. Sunny threw his backpack on a shelf and sat down near the window, enjoying the softness of an expensive-looking armchair. A strange expression appeared on his face. Well, as far as wars go, this one is weirdly opulent so far. Of course, he was sure that these luxurious conditions would not last long. No one had bothered him until the train started to move, slowly at first, then faster and faster. Soon, the familiar sights of the city and the outskirts flew by, and the great metal beast finally escaped into the wilderness. Sunny felt a solemn mood overcome his senses. Despite spending years of his life in the much more wild and untouched reaches of the dream realm, he somehow felt as if he was stepping outside human civilization for the first time. He held his breath as the various human-built structures disappeared behind. However, the actual landscape of his world did not make any impression on him. It was just sort of boring. The wild expanse of the northern quadrant mostly looked like a desolate, empty place. It was almost entirely made out of mud and snow. Whatever flora still clung to life in the barren soil looked sickly and dull. The sky was heavy and gray, and the air was slightly hazy. Apart from occasional skeletal carcasses of dead nightmare creatures or rusty wrecks left behind from the times of human wars, there was nothing much to look at. Sunny sighed. What a waste! The waking world was not entirely uninhabitable, but it was certainly inhospitable to the species that had once populated its every corner. Maybe Effie had been right, back when they spoke in the ruined cathedral of the Dark City. He stared through the window for some time, then stood up and walked to a narrow bed, deciding to go to sleep early. This was probably going to be his last opportunity to rest well for a long, long time. It would have been a shame to let the opportunity go. Burying his face in a soft pillow, Sonny closed his eyes and soon fell asleep. At some point during the night, he was awakened by strange vibrations spreading through the frame of the train. Looking up, he saw pale flashes of light outside the window and heard distant, muffled pounding. The turrets on the locomotive and front carriages of the train were firing. Since none of his shadows, which were standing watch, seemed alarmed, Sonny sighed, turned on his other side and closed his eyes again. Soon he was back to sleep. He dreamt of ice and darkness. In the morning, the train was moving forward as if nothing had happened. Sonny had expected as much, so he wasn't surprised. After freshening up in the small bathroom attached to the cabin, he walked over to the dining car and had a scrumptious breakfast. The cooking could not compete with the instructor's cafeteria at the academy, of course, but it was decent enough. As he ate, Sonny studied the other people present in the carriage. Most of them were government officers and had a military bearing. A few of them were awakened and gave him respectful nods. Even though nothing about Sonny revealed that he was a master, they were able to sense it. Most of these people were probably traveling south for the same reason that he was. They were going to Antarctica as well, so the mood in the dining car was somber. No one talked very much, and those who did kept their voices low. Sonny doubted that all the participants of the massive operation knew the full scope of the disaster that was approaching the southern quadrant. In fact, he was willing to bet that very few were as well informed as he was. More than that, none of them probably had as much battle experience as he had. If they understood the real horror of what was about to come, they wouldn't be so calm. He did not really know how to feel about that. The next morning, the armored train finally reached its destination. Sonny disembarked from the lavish carriage and froze for a moment, staring at the endless gray expanse of restless waves. In front of him was the sea. As Sonny already knew, water was the optimal way of transporting cargo and people across vast distances. Human civilization had always made use of this property to its benefit. The earliest paths of trade and cultural exchange, and therefore progress, were situated along great rivers, and later shifted to seas and oceans. That had led to many prominent civilization centers being situated along various coasts. However, humanity had regretted that fact dearly when the water slowly crawled forward and devoured all those beautiful, important cities. Even worse, once the nightmare spell appeared, seas and ocean became infested by terrifying nightmare creatures. For that reason, very few populous settlements were situated near water. The further inland they were, the better. Humans still needed to make use of the convenience that only the ocean could provide, though. For that reason, there were many fortified ports in each quadrant. Sonny was looking at one such port. Even after experiencing the dread and grandeur of the forgotten shore and the chained isles, he could not help but feel a bit of awe. The port itself looked like an unassailable fortress, with tall walls rising from the water and various fortifications protruding far into the bleak waves. Colossal cannons were aimed at the horizon, ready to bring down hell on anything that would dare to approach the crowded harbor. Various spell-tech defensive measures brimmed with energy. He had no doubt that even more were hidden underwater. Much more impressive than the port itself, however, were the ships. Sonny froze when he saw them. Around 40 metal leviathans were anchored along the shore, each more than a kilometer long and as tall as a castle. Their hulls bore such thick and heavy armor that it seemed strange for these mountains of steel to stay afloat. Some seemed shiny and new, but most bore deep, giant, ugly scars. Many armor plates were bent and corroded, while some were deformed by some unknown titanic blows. Each ship possessed a plethora of armaments, ranging from heavy artillery cannons to rapid-fire anti-air guns and snub-nosed mortars. Rows of rockets, missiles, and torpedoes could be seen in the hidden nests. The main cannons seemed especially fearsome, most of them resembling oversized railguns that stretched the whole lengths of the vessels. Each of the railguns was capable of propelling a heavy kinetic round with such ferocious speed that barely any human structure would have been able to survive the impact. Maybe not even a whole district would. The ships rested on the water like slumbering giants. Looking at them, Sonny couldn't help but shiver. Humanity was accustomed to regarding the awakened as their most deadly weapon, so it was easy to forget how mighty and destructive mundane people could be with the help of the right technology. Sadly, the technology grew less and less reliable against nightmare creatures of higher ranks. Fallen abominations could more or less shrug off the most devastating of bombardments, while corrupted ones were capable of surviving nuclear blasts. Science couldn't explain the principles at work in these instances, but plenty of empirical evidence had been gathered to ruinous results during the early days of the nightmare spell. So, despite how impressive the 40 steel leviathans looked, Sonny knew that the ships alone were not enough to brave the ocean. Unless they were complemented by awakened fighters and guided by a Nightwalker navigator, even these floating juggernauts weren't capable of surviving the journey to a different quadrant. Still, Sonny couldn't help but admire the silent majesty of them. One thing is certain, that train is nothing as it turns out. As he stared at the fleet, a familiar voice suddenly called out to him. "Hey, Sonny, welcome to our small port." He turned his head slowly. Master Jet had not changed much. She was still the same, confident, beautiful, with raven black hair and cold, icy blue eyes. Her usual uniform was gone, though, replaced by a deep blue military trench coat. There was a satisfied smile on her lips. The crowd of people parted as she walked closer and glanced at the anchored ships. "Impressive, aren't they?" Sonny lingered for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, now that I see them, I am starting to understand how we are going to evacuate 800 million people from Antarctica." Soul Reaper shook her head. "Don't be so sure. This is just one of the several convoys that is going to sail to the southern quadrant. They are going to deliver the first evacuation army to Antarctica, load up a few millions of refugees, and sail back. If everything goes well by the time the ships return, the mobilization would have already started. The fleets will bring us reinforcements, take more civilians aboard, and repeat the process as many times as it takes." She sighed. "Of course, there's more or less zero chance that everything will go well. Even if it does, it will take us at least a year to gather everyone, if we are still alive by then. Who knows, maybe we will be all overwhelmed and devoured by abominations in the first few months." Sonny glanced sideways at her, his expression bleak. "You really know how to raise morale, you know." Master Jet grinned. "Ah, don't be so serious. In any case, I am really glad that you decided to join the party, Sonny. I really need someone who I can trust by my side. Don't get me wrong, my other subordinates are all honorable and accomplished warriors, but they're not you." He blinked a couple of times. "I didn't know I was so special." She looked at him, then shrugged and started walking away, prompting Sunny to follow. It takes a certain kind of person to face the very depths of despair and still continue to fight. You are one such person, Sunny. Soul Reaper glanced at him, then added in a voice that was devoid of any humor. "And we will all experience a lot of despair in the coming months. I have a feeling." Master Jet led him to an armored military PTV that stood a few meters away from the crowded platform. It seemed that vehicle access to this part of the station was heavily restricted, but she paid it no attention. Apparently, her rank and status trumped some of the rules. The PTV itself was very different from the civilian model Sunny was accustomed to, as well as the heavier police cruiser he had ridden on occasion in the past. It was much more robust and angular, weighted down by several layers of composite armor, and entirely grounded. Even if the vehicle possessed limited levitation ability, it was perfectly capable of traversing natural terrain on its own. As they entered the cabin, towering humanoid loader robots moved in to unload cargo from the train, piloted by servicemen who could be seen in the open cockpits. The crude exoskeleton platforms were devoid of armor and failed to reach the smoothness of motion, scale, and sophistication of their military siblings, but were more than enough to perform various labor-intensive utility tasks. The PTV roared to life, startling Sunny. It seemed that the distinctions from civilian models were even more pronounced below the surface. The systems propelling the vehicle forward were entirely different, producing much more noise and vibrations, but also raw power. The PTV shot forward, narrowly avoiding several barriers before reaching the primitive cement road that led to the port. As they came closer and closer to the naval fortress, Sunny was able to study the swarm of activity boiling all around it. Currently, the port became a staging ground for a much greater force than it was designed to accommodate. Thousands upon thousands of government servants and soldiers were busy with frantic preparations for the approaching deployment. Numerous recently assembled prefab buildings stood in neat squares, some meant to provide the personnel of the 1st Evacuation Army with a temporary place to live, some serving as storage depots, production hubs, training facilities, field hospitals, and so on. A lot of heavy machinery was constantly moving between these squares, either transporting cargo or participating in the disassembly of various structures. Despite the impressive scope of the military camp, its makeshift and transient nature was apparent to the naked eye. The army was already busy deconstructing many of the buildings in order to move their components to the holds of the 40 battleships. Thousands of humans swarmed the camp like ants. Sunny saw a lot of non-combatant servicemen hurrying to accomplish their tasks, as well as plenty of soldiers busy with training exercises and drills. Some of them were awakened, but most were mundane humans. There were all types of specialist units in view: engineering corps, mechanized infantry, that moved around in fearsome exoskeleton armor suits, artillery vehicle operators, and many more that Sunny could not name. He even saw several mobile war platforms that resembled giant cyclops forged of metal, ranging from 6 to 10 meters in height. These humanoid robots and their pilots left an especially strong impression on him. They were nothing like the primitive loaders he had seen a few minutes ago. Even though Sunny knew that these machines were built and operated by humans, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was looking at hulking nightmare creatures. Slowly, the scale and scope of the upcoming operation started to dawn on him. Sure, he had known the approximate numbers for a long time, but knowing and seeing were two different things. Sunny lingered for a few moments, then asked in a slightly hoarse voice, "You said that there would be several such convoys." Master Jet nodded as she easily controlled the PTV. "Yes, 4 for now. 2 will sail from the northern quadrant, 1 from both the eastern and the western. Each will transport around 100,000 soldiers to Antarctica in the coming month. That will also include around 20,000 awakened and 50 or so masters. She paused and then added, if the mobilization goes well, we will eventually have at least 60,000 awakened and anywhere between 100 and 300 masters participating in the evacuation efforts. Sunny took a deep breath. These numbers, while the amount of mundane humans being sent to Antarctica was much more immense, it was the latter two that gave him pause. 60,000 might not have seemed like much, but it meant that a quarter of all awakened in the world was going to be concentrated on one continent, and that was without even counting those who had already been based in the southern quadrant. The number of masters was even more unbelievable. 300 was more than a half of all ascended alive today. The government was truly pulling out all the stops. Such might. But was it going to be enough? Sending so many awakened to war would also inevitably leave the other three quadrants with less protection, and their inhabitants more exposed to the vagaries of the nightmare spell. The pressure on the existing infrastructure was bound to increase dramatically after the flood of refugees reached the strongholds of humanity, too. It is all such a mess. Looking at the thousands of people moving around the temporary camp, Sunny couldn't help but wonder how many of them would be coming back. He had no choice but to wonder if he himself would survive as well. Even though the members of the first evacuation army seemed trained and disciplined, he could see hints of fear and uncertainty hidden deep in their eyes. These people might have been dedicated and professional soldiers, but none of them had ever faced the kind of threat they were going to throw themselves against soon. Funnily enough, Sunny, despite his young age and lack of a service record, had come much closer to this kind of warfare and was much better prepared to withstand its horrors than most members of this hastily assembled army. Finally, he felt something that he had not felt even once since learning about the approaching disaster. The weight of responsibility slowly settled on his shoulders. Sunny sighed and then mentally shook it off. What nonsense is this? He looked at Master Jet, lingered for a moment, and then asked, so, when do I get a dapper uniform? Once they entered the confines of the port fortress, the human traffic lessened to a considerable degree. However, there were still plenty of people around, all moving with determined haste. Master Jet parked the PTV near a blocky, low building and opened the hatch to exit. Breathing in the cold winter air, she closed her eyes for a moment and then let out a long sigh. After that, Soul Reaper glanced at him with a grin. Actually, you arrived just on time. The officer roster of our company is more or less full as of a few days ago, so we were about to hold our first briefing. It was supposed to start half an hour ago, but I postponed to come grab you from the train station. Sunny raised an eyebrow. Oh. Master Jet nodded. Everyone more or less only knows as much as you do, so I'll bring all of you up to speed in one go. Granted, the rest had more time to prepare, not to mention the fact that they have been with the government for years. Don't let those old dogs intimidate you, though. Sunny smiled. Do I look like someone who is easily intimidated? She glanced at him and laughed. You do, actually. That is one of your advantages as far as I'm concerned. Being underestimated is always a boon. She walked forward at a brisk pace and said without looking back, the paperwork can wait for later. We'll get you settled and processed after the briefing. Usually, you would not have been allowed anywhere near the classified information without proper clearance and documentation, but these days proper procedure has taken a backseat to efficiency. Plus, there are very few people who can resist my charm. Sunny hurried to keep up with Master Jet as they entered the low building. After cutting through several checkpoints without anyone daring to look directly at Soul Reaper, let alone say something about the apparent civilian she was dragging into the guts of the military bunker with her, He understood that her status and reputation truly trampled procedure, at least to a large extent. Not only mundane humans, but even awakened treated her with fearful respect. Even an occasional master they walked past seemed to give her face. He hesitated, then asked with curiosity, "Can I ask, what exactly is your official title in the First Army?" Master Jet glanced at him, then smiled. "Why, I am now Colonel Jet, senior officer of the First Awakened Irregular Company of the Northern Quadrant Corps of the Evacuation Army." Kind of a mouthful, huh? Sonny blinked a couple of times, then reached into his memory of the government force organization and hierarchy. He had studied the topic a bit before leaving the city. Wait, aren't companies supposed to be commanded by captains? Colonel is 3 or 4 ranks above that. It's just one step away from being a general. Soul Reaper nodded. Usually you would be right. However, titles and authority become messy when awakened are involved. As a rule of thumb, awakened are one rank above what they would have been as mundane soldiers. That's just for normal ones, though. As irregulars, we will exist somewhat outside the army hierarchy, so our status was bumped up to reflect that. Sonny scratched the back of his head. Outside the hierarchy, what? He hesitated, then said in a subdued tone, "I am not sure what irregulars mean." She flashed him a smile. "You will be in a few minutes." Together, they entered an elevator that brought them deep underground. Master Jet led him through winding corridors of the military bunker, and then pressed the palm of her hand against a complicated biometric lock to open a thick alloy door. Sonny found himself in a spacious chamber that housed a large, round table. 5 individuals were already seated around it, quietly waiting for the start of the briefing. When Master Jet entered, they all stood up and saluted her. It was then that Sonny realized that all of them were ascended. 3 of them were men, while the other 2 were women. The oldest master seemed to be nearing his 50s, while the youngest was only slightly older than Soul Reaper. All of them wore serious expressions on their faces and looked at her with somber respect. She waved a hand. "At ease, we are all ascended here. There's no need for ceremony." The masters hesitated for a few moments, then relaxed and sat down. Master Jet unbuttoned her navy blue trench coat, then threw it on the backrest of an empty chair. Sonny let out a heavy sigh, then made sure to look somewhere else. His cheek suddenly started to burn for no apparent reason. As it turned out, his new superior had dismissed her usual uniform in favor of a tight-fitting black bodysuit. In fact, all the masters present in the room were wearing one. It made sense. People like Sonny and them had no need of army-issued armor. They would all be using their memories in the field. A bodysuit that could easily fit under any type of enchanted armor, so wearing it instead of a uniform was not only more convenient, but also practical. That didn't make it easy on Sonny, though. There were very few places he could rest his eyes on without potentially getting into trouble. It was pure torture. Master Jet sat down, prompting him to do the same. As much as Sonny was flustered by the black bodysuits, the rest of the Ascended were similarly confused by his civilian clothes and age. Finally, one of them glanced at Soul Reaper and asked, "Excuse me, ma'am, who is this young man? Is he your new adjutant?" She glanced at them, remained silent for a moment, and then smiled. Gods no, this young man is Master Sunless, the latest and final addition to the command structure of the First Irregular Company. He is not only one of the youngest humans in history to reach the rank of an Ascended, but also has a kill count higher than most of you combined. So, give him a warm welcome, I guess." The 5 Ascended were surprised by such a colorful description, but quickly got over their shock. No one seemed to have doubts about Sonny's credentials, and for a simple reason, there were no weak masters. Every person who had chosen to challenge the second nightmare and survived was an elite by definition. So, his rank was the only proof of competence he needed to be accepted by them. That was not to say that these government officers felt threatened by Sonny's accomplishments. All of them were experienced, battle-tested fighters, specialists. They had well-deserved confidence in their own capabilities. Master Jet looked at them and smiled. Since we have already started, let's get introductions out of the way. Some of you may know each other, while others are relatively new faces. She went down the line, introducing each of the ascended that were going to serve as the backbone of the first irregular company. The oldest among them was a muscular man that seemed to be in his late 40s or early 50s. Of course, as an ascended, he looked incredibly well for his age. Master Randall was mature and grizzled, with gray hair and a full beard that perfectly suited his chiseled, masculine face. The black bodysuit lay snug against his well-pronounced muscles. Everything about the man told that he was a seasoned, consummate soldier. His presence was solid and steady. Master Randall might have not fought side by side with the members of the first generation when the spell had appeared, but due to his age, he most likely witnessed its descent as a child. His well of experience was of great benefit to the company. In fact, one would have expected him to be in charge instead of sole reaper. However, even if the man had any thoughts about that matter, he did not let them show. The gorgeous woman sitting next to him stood out among the group of masters due to her good-natured, friendly demeanor. Ascended Jessie looked almost like the opposite of Master Jet. She had straw blonde hair, a healthy tan, sparkling blue eyes, and radiated a strange feeling of warmth. Coincidentally, she was the closest to Soul Reaper in terms of age. No one would have called the beautiful blonde soft, though. Her tall, slender body brimmed with energy and barely suppressed strength. The relaxed attitude hit a sharp and cutting edge. This master seemed to be not only enthusiastic about life, but also about combat and the carnage of battle. She was a formidable warrior, without a doubt. So were the others. The third woman among the officers of the company was called Ascended Winter. She was in her late 30s and seemed to be the most calm of the group. Her curly hair was dark brown and tied into a simple ponytail. Sunny didn't know what color her eyes were because, strangely, the woman wore a pair of polarized sunglasses even though they were all currently deep underground. She sat on her chair in a pose so relaxed that it almost seemed inappropriate for this important meeting. Her beautiful face was aloof and nonchalant. The sleeves of her bodysuit were rolled up, revealing toned forearms and a solid tattoo that turned one of them completely black. If not for the fact that Master Winter had stood up to salute Soul Reaper when they entered, Sunny would have thought that she was fast asleep. The man next to her seemed to have the same tattoo, hinting that they were or had been members of the same unit in the past. He was of the same age as his female colleague, with honest eyes and a gallant bearing. There was dark stubble on his handsome face and black circles under his eyes. Ascended Dale seemed like a steady, stalwart warrior. Sunny did not know for sure, but felt that the man's aspect had at least some relation to defense and protection. He sensed that if Master Dale decided to stand his ground, very few things in the world would have been able to move him. The last officer of the first irregular company was slightly older and stood in stark contrast to Master Dale. His cold eyes, inexpressive face, and chilling gaze all expressed one thing. Ascended Davis was a killer. He seemed like the most offense-oriented master of the bunch, but that quality was not without subtlety. On the contrary, it seemed to be shrewd, quiet, and absolutely deadly. Sunny suspected that Davis was what he himself had once wished to be, the kind of fighter who utilized cunning and stealth to destroy the enemy with one surgical strike, thus avoiding the trouble of having to withstand retaliation. Together with Sunny and Jet, the five masters were going to lead the first irregular company. Coincidentally, just like Soul Reaper, each of the five ascended had a nickname. Masters Randall, Jesse, Winter, Dale, and Davis were also known as Vandal, Mustang, Queen, Knight, and Pride. Sonny was the only person without one, which made him feel slightly jealous. "Well, I can always go by Mongrel." He blinked. "What? No, that's a terrible nickname and an even worse idea." Who said that he even needed a nickname? He was perfectly fine being called Sonny anyway. After the initial introductions were complete, Master Jet glanced at them again and said, "We will get to know each other's aspects and combat capabilities later. It is not too important for now anyway, since I expect all of you to act independently of the rest more often than not. Now, let's get down to business. Today, I will bring you up to speed about the projected composition of the first irregular company, our purpose, and guiding military doctrine." She pressed something on her communicator, and a large projection appeared in the middle of the table. Sonny studied the large archipelago with a prominent landmass in the east. Master Jet lingered for a moment and then continued. "But to do that, you will have to understand the general shape of the upcoming operation. As all of you already know, this is Antarctica." She gestured at the projection. "All Antarctica is divided into 3 parts." Master Jet gestured to the projection. "All of Antarctica is divided into 3 parts: West Antarctica, East Antarctica, and the Antarctic Center." West Antarctica was mostly submerged in water and consisted of a scattering of islands, some of them small, some of them large. East Antarctica was one large landmass that was peppered by numerous lakes, with a prominent mountain chain in the middle of it. The Antarctic Center was a long, narrow landmass that rested between the two, occupied almost entirely by tall mountains. Soul Reaper continued. "West Antarctica is mostly devoid of human population, so it presents little interest to us. The Antarctic Center is an administrative and technological hub of the quadrant, while East Antarctica is the largest and most densely populated region of the continent." She paused for a moment and then added somberly, "The first evacuation army is going to set sail in 2 weeks. We will reach Antarctica 2, maybe 3 weeks after that. By that time, the chain of nightmares would already be starting. Local garrisons are already experiencing an increased number of manifesting gates, but the number will explode by the end of March. After that, it will only keep growing." Master Jet stared at the projection for a bit and then said calmly, "No matter how many soldiers we send, we won't be able to contain the flood of nightmare creatures that enter through these gates. This is something that had never happened in history before. Even the great wars that the first generation fought pale in comparison to the chain of nightmares. Don't forget that almost all abominations back then were of the dormant rank. We aren't that lucky." She sighed, then leaned back and crossed her arms. "According to our scientists and diviners, the mass of gates is going to be of the 2nd category and 3rd categories. That means awakened, fallen, and even corrupted nightmare creatures, in numbers greater than anything we have seen. Of course, something even worse can happen, so we are not going to try and contain them." The faces of the master slowly grew dim. Noticing it, Soul Reaper shook her head. "There are better ways to achieve our objective. Once the army makes landfall, it will split into 3 parts, with each part pursuing a distinct objective during the first phase of the operation. One of the objectives is to turn a small number of select cities into fortified evacuation centers that can withstand the siege of nightmare creatures for months, or even years ahead." Master Jet pointed at several points on the map, then continued. "The second objective is to relocate all external human population to these centers, where they will wait for their turn to board the ships. Neither the relocation nor the wait are going to be a short process. Finally, the third objective is to establish and maintain the evacuation corridors for the relocating citizens. Once everyone is safely behind the established perimeter of siege strongholds, the first phase of the operation will be considered to be complete. Sonny tentatively raised a hand. Yes. He glanced at other masters with a dubious expression, then asked, "Why are we waiting for the disaster to strike before starting to evacuate people? Wouldn't it be easier to get at least some of them out right now?" Soul Reaper gave him a rueful smile. "That is because everyone was convinced that the event won't happen for at least a few more years. Our level of preparation is wholly inadequate, and there are no established means to start the evacuation prematurely. In short, the government was caught with its pants down. The deployment of the First Army is a messy and slapdash affair, which means that a lot more soldiers are going to die as the result. Make no mistake, though, this is the best we can do, considering the situation." Sonny sighed, then nodded in understanding. Master Jet glanced at him and continued, "After the first phase of the operation is complete, the second one will commence. By then, the second evacuation army should be already fully formed and arrive to reinforce the depleted First Army. This phase is simple, which is not to say easy. We will pull back all our forces to the siege capitals and hold them for as long as it takes to evacuate every civilian. After that, the third phase will result in a complete exodus of humans from Antarctica and the consequent heavy continental bombardment. The southern quadrant will cease to exist." She took a poignant pause, then smiled darkly. "That is the gist of the operation in broad strokes. Now, for details. As you must have already surmised from the name of our company, it is going to play a special role throughout all three phases of the evacuation. The first irregular company will not be tied to any existing battalion, regiment, or division. We will not be supporting or leading any of the grunt soldiers. Instead, we will act as elite irregulars." Soul Reaper leaned forward and looked at them with her icy blue eyes. "Each of you will be in charge of a cohort of some of the best awakened warriors in the government employ. The cohorts will act semi-independently and respond to any overwhelming obstacle that threatens to slow down the evacuation. Whenever the mundane soldiers or their awakened counterparts encounter a problem that they can't handle, we will be sent to resolve the situation through any means necessary." The room suddenly became very cold, and so did Master Jet's expression. "What it means is that we will be thrown into the most dire, bloody, and hopeless flashpoints of the entire operation on a consistent basis. Unlike regular soldiers who will most likely have time to rest and recover between battles, we will be enduring a constant succession of rapid combat deployments until the evacuation is completed, or until we all die. That is why the first irregular company was not only allocated 7 Ascended, but also why these Ascended are the absolute best we have. Each of you is an elite among elites. Make that count." She studied the faces of her subordinates and then raised an eyebrow. "Any questions?" Master Winter suddenly raised a hand, revealing that she was not, in fact, asleep. When she spoke, her voice was unexpectedly relaxed. "What's our logistics situation? Is there going to be food, or are we going to spend months chewing on monster meat?" "You know, like usual." Briefing lasted for a while longer. The 7 Ascended of the first irregular company had a lot of things to discuss, and while a few nuances went over Sonny's head, he slowly gained a better understanding of the upcoming ordeal. That said, each of them had way too much to do before the naval convoy left for the southern quadrant, so wasting precious time on long conversations was not in anyone's interest. Eventually, the 5 masters left, leaving Sonny and Jet alone in the meeting room. There was a grim expression on his face. Sonny sighed, then glanced at his superior. "I am not going to lie, all of this seems a bit overwhelming." Soul Reaper smiled and shook her head dismissively. "Don't be too concerned. You already have the necessary experience and qualifications to make things work. It is not like the others are better prepared to deal with something of that scope. Above all, we will need the ability to swiftly learn and adapt. That is how we will survive this unprecedented mess of a disaster." He looked at the ceiling with a thoughtful expression. Well, when Master Jet put it like that, yes, it made sense to say that he was qualified to face the challenges of the Chain of Nightmares. The other irregulars might have been older and more experienced, but no one had ever lived through something like that. In the absence of relevant experience, adaptability was arguably more important. In that regard, his young age and flexible mindset could even be called an advantage. Plus, Sonny had always excelled at being able to adapt to anything. Soul Reaper stood up and beckoned as she headed for the exit. "Come on, let's get you settled." They moved to a different level of the bunker, where some sort of administrative center had been hastily established in recent weeks. The military admins were even busier than the soldiers above ground. An atmosphere of feverish, barely contained chaos hung in the air as hundreds of officers tried to juggle tens of thousands of issues as they prepared the army for departure. Maybe because of this haste, or maybe because of Master Jet's presence, the paperwork did not take long. To Sonny's astonishment, it took less than half an hour for him to officially become a government agent and an officer of the 1st Evacuation Army. He was issued the rank of a captain, along with all the status and privileges of one. Sonny couldn't help but blink a couple of times. Captain Sunless, damn, it has a nice ring to it. Without wasting any time, they moved to another level, where Sonny was issued with a basic set of gear corresponding to his rank. Among other things, he also received the ubiquitous black bodysuit. His communicator was already of a high-grade government model, so it simply received an extensive software upgrade. As they waited for all the routine procedures to be performed, Sonny and Master Jet quietly discussed business. "So, what exactly happens now?" She looked at him for a few moments. "Well, you will have to do a lot of things to get ready for Antarctica. Don't worry too much and take it one step at a time." Soul Reaper paused. "First things first. In the next few days, you will have to make several important decisions. Don't rush and really think matters through before committing to a choice. However, don't wait too long either. The longer you take, the less time you'll have to accomplish other tasks." She gestured to his communicator. "All the necessary features and permissions have already been added to your comm. Your credentials should have been added into the system as well, so you can access the data through it." Sonny checked the new features added to the operating system of his communicator and nodded. "So what exactly are these decisions?" Master Jet smiled. "First of all, you are an officer of an elite combat unit now. The members of the 1st Irregular Company are entitled to receive a fair share of rare equipment and precious resources that the government has to offer. That said, each cohort is unique and has special demands. To make sure that you and your soldiers are outfitted with not only great tools, but also ones that suit them best, a very generous amount of contribution points has been added to your personal balance." She gestured to one of the symbols on the screen of his communicator. "Your cohort will be provided with a basic set of assets, but on top of that, you will be able to customize them or acquire additional equipment yourself. You can peruse what the logistics and supply has to offer through that interface, as well as claim whatever you choose. Of course, the inventory available to the 1st Irregular Company is much more robust and exclusive than what mundane units have access to." Soul Reaper sighed wistfully. "What you settle on is at your discretion. You can decide to upgrade your personal gear with powerful tools, memories, or even echoes. You can choose to equip your soldiers with better equipment instead. You can assign most points to comprehensively upgrade the technical assets provided to your cohort. Hell, you can even convert all the contribution points into credits and transfer them to your personal account. Not that I would advise doing something like that, of course." Sonny's eyes glistened. If there was one thing he loved, it was receiving free stuff. Even if most of the contribution points would go into strengthening his cohort, it was still a great opportunity to soothe his greed. He was sure that the government had a lot of amazing stuff in its coffers. The decision to enlist was already starting to look much more appealing. There was one problem, however. He gave Master Jet a curious look. I can't really fine-tune gear and equipment to the needs of my cohort if I don't have a cohort, though. Right. She nodded. Indeed. Actually, that is the second set of decisions. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.